The stagecoach rattled to a halt, sending a plume of dust into the dry Arizona air as Gabriella Mills clutched her worn leather bag and stared out the window at the small frontier town of Sweetwater. It was 1875, and the journey west had been nearly as grueling as the heartache that had pushed her to answer an advertisement for a mail-order bride in the first place. "End of the line, madam," the driver called, his voice gruff from years of shouting over thundering hooves and creaking wood. Gabriella nodded, though no one could see her. Her hands trembled as she gathered her few possessions. 22 years old, and already she had experienced more loss than most faced in a lifetime. First her parents to influenza, then her fiancé James back in Boston, his betrayal with her cousin still a fresh wound that ached with every heartbeat. When she stepped down from the stagecoach, the dust immediately coated the hem of her blue calico dress. Gabriella glanced around, searching for the man who had written her such promising, gentle letters. Isaac Edwards, a cattle rancher who needed a wife. In his correspondence, he had seemed kind and steady, nothing like the smooth-talking James who had promised her the world while secretly planning to marry another. A tall figure approached from the direction of the general store. He wore a worn leather vest over a simple cotton shirt, and his face was partially obscured by the brim of his hat. When he removed it, Gabriella was struck by eyes as blue as the endless western sky. "Miss Mills?" he asked, his voice deep but uncertain. "Mr. Edwards." Gabriella forced a smile, though it felt hollow. "I'm pleased to finally meet you." Isaac Edwards nodded, looking as nervous as she felt. "Welcome to Sweetwater. I hope your journey wasn't too difficult." He reached for her bag, his movements careful as though approaching a skittish horse. "It was long," Gabriella admitted, "but necessary." She didn't explain further, but something in her tone must have revealed more than she intended. Isaac studied her face for a moment, his expression softening. "You've come a long way to start again," he said quietly. "I recognize that look." "What look?" Gabriella asked, suddenly self-conscious. "The one that says your heart's been broken." He spoke matter-of-factly, without pity, which somehow made it easier to hear. "Forgive my directness, madam. Living out here, there's not much use for dancing around truths." Tears threatened, but Gabriella blinked them back. "You're perceptive, Mr. Edwards." He offered a small, gentle smile that transformed his weather-worn face. "Then let me be the man who fixes it." The simple declaration, spoken without pretense or grandiosity, made Gabriella's breath catch. It wasn't a flowery promise like James had made, but something about the quiet confidence in Isaac's voice felt more genuine than all the poetry her former fiancé had recited. "That's a bold claim, sir," she managed to say, though her voice wavered. "Not bold, just honest." He gestured toward a wagon parked nearby. "My ranch is about an hour's ride from town. I've prepared a room for you in the main house. We won't rush anything, Miss Mills. You have my word on that." As they walked to the wagon, Gabriella felt the eyes of townsfolk following them. A mail-order bride was still something of a novelty, even in a frontier town where unmarried women were scarce. "People are staring," she murmured. "They're curious," Isaac replied. "News travels fast in Sweetwater. By supper time, everyone will know you've arrived." He helped her onto the wagon bench with a strong, calloused hand. "Does that bother you?" Gabriella considered this. "In Boston, I was the subject of gossip after what happened. I suppose I'd hoped to escape that." Isaac climbed up beside her and took the reins. "Folks here are generally good people. Curious, but not cruel. And they mind their own business when told to." As they left town, the landscape opened up before them, rolling plains stretching toward distant mountains, painted in hues of amber and gold by the late afternoon sun. It was beautiful in a wild, untamed way that Boston could never match. "It's different from what I'm used to," Gabriella said. "Does it disappoint you?" She shook her head. "No, it's vast, like you could disappear into it and become someone new." Isaac gave her a sidelong glance. "Is that what you're hoping for, to disappear?" "Perhaps." Gabriella smoothed her skirts, avoiding his gaze. Is that why you came west, Mr. Edwards? A shadow crossed his face. Something like that. Lost my wife and son to cholera back in Missouri in '67, after the war and then that. There wasn't much left for me there. I'm sorry, Gabriella said softly, understanding now why he had recognized the look in her eyes. It was a long time ago, he replied, though his knuckles whitened around the reins. I came out here, built something new. It's a good life, Miss Mills. Different, but good. They rode in companionable silence for a while, the rhythmic creak of the wagon wheels filling the space between them. Gabriella found herself studying Isaac's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the small scar near his temple, the way the corners of his eyes crinkled when he squinted at the horizon. I should tell you, she said suddenly, I'm not whole, Mr. Edwards. I came here because I had nowhere else to go and your letters seemed kind, but I don't want to deceive you, my heart is broken, he finished for her. I know I meant what I said in town. You can't fix what happened, Isaac nodded. No, I can't change the past, neither yours nor mine. But hearts mend, Miss Mills, with time and gentle handling. I'm not asking for love today or tomorrow or even next month, just a chance to build something real. The simplicity of his request touched something inside Gabriella. There was no artifice in Isaac Edwards, no hidden agenda she could detect. He was offering something she hadn't dared hope for. Patience. I can agree to that, she said. The Edwards Ranch appeared on the horizon as the sun began its descent, a modest but well-maintained property with a main house, a barn, several outbuildings and corrals containing horses and cattle. It wasn't grand, but it spoke of care and hard work. Home, Isaac said, a note of pride in his voice. It's not much compared to Boston, I imagine. It's lovely, Gabriella replied truthfully. After the crowded streets and constant noise of the city, the openness felt like a relief. As the wagon approached, a weathered man in his 60s emerged from the barn, followed by a younger man who bore a strong resemblance to Isaac. That's George Miller, my foreman, been with me since I settled here. And that's my younger brother, Thomas. He helps run the ranch. The two men watched with undisguised curiosity as Isaac brought the wagon to a stop. So you actually went through with it, Thomas said, grinning as he approached. Brought back a city gal. Mind your manners, Isaac warned, though there was no real heat in his tone. Miss Mills, this is my tactless brother, Thomas Edwards. Thomas, Miss Gabriella Mills from Boston. Thomas swept off his hat and bowed with exaggerated formality. Pleasure to meet you, miss. Don't mind my brother. He's been cleaning and fretting for days getting ready for your arrival. Gabriella couldn't help but smile at the younger man's easy charm. It's nice to meet you, Mr. Edwards. Just Thomas, please. We can't have two Mr. Edwards running around confusing everyone. George Miller approached more cautiously, nodding respectfully. Welcome to Sweetwater, madam. Hope you'll be happy here. Thank you, Mr. Miller. Isaac helped Gabriella down from the wagon. I'll show you to your room so you can rest before supper. You must be tired from your journey. The main house was modest but comfortable, a central living area with a stone fireplace, a kitchen with a large wooden table, and several bedrooms leading off a short hallway. The furniture was simple but sturdy, and someone had placed wildflowers in a jar on the sideboard. Sarah from town comes in twice a week to help with cleaning, Isaac explained as he carried Gabriella's trunk to a bedroom at the end of the hall. I'm afraid we're not much for decorating, but if there's anything you'd like to change. Gabriella stepped into the bedroom and felt a rush of relief. It was clean and private, with a bed covered in a handmade quilt, a chest of drawers, and a small writing desk beneath the window. Someone had hung curtains of blue gingham matching the quilt. Did you do this? She asked, touching the fabric. Isaac looked embarrassed. Asked Mrs. Johnson at the general store what a lady might like. She helped choose the material. Thomas's wife Mary sewed them before she passed 2 years back. The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched Gabriella deeply. It's perfect, she said. Thank you, Isaac nodded, clearly relieved. I'll leave you to settle in. Supper's in about an hour. He paused at the door. "Miss Mills?" "Yes, I'm glad you came." After he left, Gabriella sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed the tears to fall. Not tears of despair this time, but of release. The journey had been long, the future uncertain, but for the first time since James's betrayal, she felt something like hope. Supper that evening was a simple affair of beef stew, cornbread, and apple pie. Thomas kept the conversation flowing with tales of ranch life and local gossip, while Isaac mostly listened, occasionally adding a comment or correcting his brother's more outlandish claims. "Thomas likes to embellish," Isaac explained after a particularly dramatic story involving a mountain lion. "The cat was half that size and it ran off as soon as it saw us." "You're ruining my story," Thomas complained good-naturedly. "I'm providing accuracy," Isaac countered, the hint of a smile softening his features. Gabriella found herself relaxing as the meal progressed. These men weren't the refined gentlemen of Boston society, but there was an honesty to them that she found refreshing. "So, Miss Mills," George asked as they were finishing the pie, "what made you decide to answer an advertisement for a bride all the way out here, if you don't mind my asking?" Isaac shot him a warning look, but Gabriella shook her head. "It's a fair question. I was engaged to be married in Boston, but my fiancé—" She took a steadying breath. "He decided my cousin was a better match for his ambitions. They announced their engagement 3 days after breaking mine." Thomas whistled. "That's cold, Thomas," Isaac admonished. "No, he's right," Gabriella said. "It was humiliating. Everyone knew I couldn't bear to stay." She met Isaac's gaze across the table. "Your advertisement seemed sincere. You wrote about wanting a partnership, not just a housekeeper or, well, other things men sometimes seek in these arrangements." Isaac's ears reddened slightly. "I meant what I wrote." "I believe you," Gabriella replied and realized she truly did. After supper, while Thomas and George returned to the bunkhouse, Isaac showed Gabriella around the immediate property. The night was cool, the sky ablaze with more stars than she had ever seen in Boston. "It's beautiful," she breathed, staring upward. "One of the things I love about this place," Isaac said. "Makes a man feel small, but in a good way, puts troubles in perspective." Gabriella nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. Under this vast canopy of stars, James's betrayal seemed less catastrophic, more like a painful step on a longer journey. "Mr. Edwards?" "Isaac, please. If we're to be married, formality seems unnecessary." "Isaac," she repeated, testing the name, "I want to be clear about something. I came here prepared to fulfill the terms of our arrangement. I will be a good wife to you, but I need time before certain aspects of marriage." In the moonlight, she could see him nod. "I understand, Gabriella. There's no rush. We have time to get to know each other properly." "Thank you," she whispered, relief washing over her. "We should head back inside," he suggested. "Morning comes early on a ranch." That night, alone in her new room, Gabriella wrote in her journal about her first impressions of Sweetwater and the man she had agreed to marry. Isaac Edwards was nothing like James, no flowery speeches or grand gestures, just steady reliability and unexpected kindness. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something she could build upon. The next few weeks established a rhythm to life at the Edwards Ranch. Gabriella rose early, helping to prepare breakfast and learning the household routines. Isaac worked from sunrise to sunset, managing the cattle operation with Thomas and their small crew of ranch hands. They dined together each evening and afterward often sat on the porch talking as the sun set. Isaac told her about his dreams for expanding the ranch, breeding better cattle, perhaps adding more horses. Gabriella shared stories of her childhood in Boston, her love of books, her skill with needlework. "We should get you some new books," Isaac suggested one evening. "There's not much of a library in Sweetwater, but I could write to Denver the next time I place an order with the mercantile." "You wouldn't mind?" Gabriella asked, surprised by the offer. "Why would I mind? Everyone needs something that brings them joy." It was a simple statement, but it revealed much about the kind of man Isaac Edwards was. He didn't see her interests as frivolous or distracting from her duties, but as essential parts of who she was. 2 months after Gabriella's arrival, they rode into town together for supplies. Sweetwater had grown more familiar to her now, the general store where Mrs. Johnson always had the latest gossip, the small church where Reverend Parker preached every Sunday, the busy saloon that Isaac always steered her away from. "Mrs. Edwards," Mrs. Johnson called as they entered the store. The title still felt strange to Gabriella, though she and Isaac had been officially married by the Reverend 3 weeks after her arrival, a simple ceremony with only Thomas and George as witnesses. It was a marriage in name only thus far, with Isaac continuing to give her space, sleeping in a separate room without complaint. His patience only increased her growing respect for him. "Good morning, Mrs. Johnson," Gabriella replied, smiling at the plump shopkeeper. "We've got some new fabrics in that I think you'll like, and those seeds you asked about last time." Mrs. Johnson bustled around the counter, eager to show off her wares. While Gabriella examined the fabric, she overheard Isaac speaking with Sheriff Parker near the door. "They hit the Morton place yesterday," the sheriff was saying in a low voice. "Took most of their cash and Mrs. Morton's jewelry, same gang that robbed the stagecoach last month, I reckon." Isaac frowned. "Anyone hurt?" "Morton took a blow to the head when he tried to stop them, but he'll recover. I've got a posse forming to track them down." "Be careful, Tom. These men sound desperate." Gabriella tried not to show that she was listening, but when Isaac returned to her side, she couldn't help asking, "Is everything all right?" Isaac hesitated, then sighed. "There's been some trouble with outlaws in the area. Nothing for you to worry about, though." But there was worry in his eyes that hadn't been there before, and Gabriella felt a flutter of fear. The West wasn't just beautiful vistas and fresh starts, there were real dangers here too. That night after they returned home, Gabriella noticed Isaac checking the locks on the doors and windows, something he hadn't done so meticulously before. "Are you expecting trouble?" she asked directly. Isaac paused, then turned to face her. "Probably not, but it doesn't hurt to be cautious." The men the sheriff described have been moving through the territory, targeting isolated homesteads. "Like ours," Gabriella said quietly. "Yes, but we're not as isolated as some. We have Thomas and George and the other hands nearby." He crossed to where she stood and, after a moment's hesitation, took her hands in his. "I won't let anything happen to you, Gabriella, I promise you that." The sincerity in his voice made her heart quicken. "I believe you," she said. For a moment they stood close, his calloused thumbs brushing over her knuckles. Then, almost reluctantly, he released her hands. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow's another day," but sleep didn't come easily that night. Gabriella lay awake, thinking not of outlaws but of Isaac, the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her, the gentleness in his hands despite their strength, the way he listened when she spoke as if her every word mattered. She had come to Sweetwater with a broken heart, determined to build a practical partnership devoid of the emotional risks that had devastated her in Boston. Yet somehow, without grand declarations or dramatic gestures, Isaac Edwards was slowly earning her trust and, perhaps, something more. 2 days later, trouble arrived at the Edwards ranch. Gabriella was hanging laundry in the yard when she heard the pounding of approaching hoofbeats. 4 riders appeared on the ridge, moving fast toward the house. Something in their posture, the way they held their weapons at the ready, sent a chill through her. "Isaac," she called, dropping the wet sheet back into the basket. "Riders coming." Isaac emerged from the barn, squinting toward the approaching men. His expression hardened, and he reached for the rifle leaning against the porch. "Get inside, Gabriella. Now." She didn't question him, hurrying into the house as Isaac strode toward the approaching riders, rifle in hand but not yet raised. From the window, Gabriella watched as the 4 men reined their horses to a stop a few yards away. She couldn't hear what was being said, but she could see the tension in Isaac's shoulders, the threatening postures of the strangers. One man, wearing a dusty black hat, seemed to be doing most of the talking, gesturing toward the house and the barn beyond. Thomas emerged from the corral, another rifle in his hands, moving to stand beside his brother. The odds were still unfavorable 4-2, and Gabriella's heart raced with fear. Then the man in the black hat reached for his gun. What happened next was a blur of motion and sound. Isaac dove to the side as a shot rang out. Thomas fired, hitting one of the riders, who tumbled from his horse. The others scattered, taking cover behind the water trough and a wagon. Gunfire erupted, the sharp cracks echoing across the yard. Gabriella pressed herself against the wall beside the window, terrified but unable to look away. She saw Isaac firing methodically from behind a stack of crates, saw Thomas take a hit to the shoulder and stagger but remain standing. When George and 2 other ranch hands came running from the fields, rifles ready, the tide turned. After a brief but intense exchange, the 2 remaining outlaws mounted their horses and fled, dragging their wounded companion with them. Gabriella rushed outside as Isaac helped Thomas toward the house, blood staining his brother's shirt. "It's not bad," Thomas was insisting, though his face was pale with pain. "Just grazed me." "Gabriella, get the medical kit," Isaac ordered, his voice tight with concern. "George, take Jeffries and make sure they're really gone. Wilson, ride for the doctor just in case." Gabriella hurried to fetch the box of medical supplies they kept in the kitchen cupboard, her hands shaking but her mind surprisingly clear. When she returned, Isaac had Thomas seated at the kitchen table, his shirt removed to reveal a bloody furrow across his upper arm. "Hold still," Isaac muttered, cleaning the wound with whiskey from a bottle kept for medicinal purposes. Thomas hissed in pain but didn't pull away. Gabriella stepped forward. "Let me help." Isaac glanced up, his expression strained. "Do you know how to dress a wound?" "Yes. My father insisted I learn basic medical care." She didn't add that she had practiced those skills during the war, volunteering at a military hospital in Boston despite her mother's objections. Isaac nodded and moved aside, allowing Gabriella to take over. She worked efficiently, cleaning the wound thoroughly, applying a poultice of herbs and bandaging it securely. "You're good at this," Thomas observed, watching her tie off the bandage. "I've had practice," Gabriella replied, concentrating on her task. When she finished, Isaac placed a hand on her shoulder. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You kept your head when many would have panicked." She looked up at him, seeing something new in his gaze, a deep respect tinged with something that made her breath catch. "Who were they?" she asked. "The Blackwell gang, most likely. They've been terrorizing the territory for months." Isaac's jaw tightened. "They won't be back here, not after the welcome they received." That night, after Thomas had been checked by the doctor, who confirmed Gabriella's treatment was perfectly adequate, and the ranch hands had set up watches around the property, Isaac and Gabriella sat together on the porch swing. "I was afraid today," Gabriella admitted, watching the moon rise over the distant hills. "Anyone would be," Isaac replied. "You handled it better than most," she shook her head. "Not afraid for myself, for you." The admission felt significant, a step beyond the careful boundaries they had established. "When I saw that man draw on you." Isaac was silent for a long moment, then hesitantly he reached for her hand. "I've faced worse and survived. The war, yes, and after. Life can be hard out here, Gabriella, that's why I wanted." He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "That's why I wrote that advertisement, not just for help with the ranch or to have a cook and housekeeper. I wanted someone to share it all with the good and the bad." Gabriella turned to look at him fully, seeing the vulnerability in his usually stoic expression. "And am I what you hoped for?" The question hung between them, weighted with meaning. "You're more," Isaac said simply. "When you stepped off that stagecoach, I saw the sadness in you, and I worried I was being selfish, bringing you to this harsh place when you were already hurting. But you're stronger than I gave you credit for." "I wasn't," Gabriella confessed. "Not at first. I came here feeling like a ghost of myself. And now," she considered this, realizing with some surprise that the constant ache James's betrayal had left behind had faded to a distant memory. In its place was something new, a growing affection for this quiet, honorable man and the life they were building together. Now I feel like myself again, maybe even a better version. She squeezed his hand. You said you wanted to fix my broken heart. I think you're keeping that promise, though not in the way I expected. Isaac's smile was soft in the moonlight. How so? You haven't tried to replace what I lost or make me forget it happened. You've just made space for something new to grow. The swing creaked gently as Isaac moved closer, his arms slipping around her shoulders. It was the most intimate they had been since her arrival, and Gabriella found herself leaning into his warmth. Gabriella, he said, his voice low, may I kiss you? The question, asked with such respect for her boundaries, made her heart swell with tenderness. Yes, she whispered. His kiss was gentle at first, almost tentative, but when Gabriella responded, it deepened into something that sent warmth cascading through her. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. I think I'm falling in love with you, he confessed. I didn't expect that when I wrote that advertisement. I hoped for compatibility, respect, maybe friendship. But this. Gabriella touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw. I think I'm falling in love with you too, she said, the words coming more easily than she had anticipated. It's different from before, quieter somehow but deeper. That night, Gabriella moved her belongings into Isaac's room, officially becoming his wife in every sense. Their lovemaking was tender and unhurried, a mutual discovery rather than a duty fulfilled. Afterward, lying in the circle of his arms, Gabriella thought about the journey that had brought her to this place, the heartbreak that had seemed unbearable, the desperate decision to leave everything familiar behind, the leap of faith into an unknown future with a stranger. What had begun as an escape had become something far more precious, a second chance at happiness. Over the following months, life at the Edwards Ranch settled into a new rhythm. Gabriella took on more responsibilities, not because Isaac expected it, but because she wanted to be a true partner in their shared enterprise. She planted a vegetable garden, began keeping bees for honey, and even learned to ride properly so she could accompany Isaac on his rounds of the property. The Blackwell gang was eventually caught and brought to justice after a failed bank robbery in a neighboring town. The territory became a bit safer, though Isaac never relaxed his vigilance entirely. Thomas's wound healed well, leaving only a scar that he proudly showed off to the young women in town, embellishing the story with each telling, until Isaac would roll his eyes and correct the more outlandish claims. A year after Gabriella's arrival in Sweetwater, she sat with Isaac on their porch swing, watching a spectacular sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. I have something to tell you, she said, taking his hand and placing it gently on her abdomen. Isaac's eyes widened as understanding dawned. Are you certain? Dr. Wilson confirmed it yesterday. We're going to have a baby in the spring. The joy that transformed Isaac's face was beautiful to behold. He gathered Gabriella into his arms, holding her as if she were made of the most precious material on earth. I never thought I'd have this again, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. A family, a child, a wife I love more than life itself. Neither did I, Gabriella admitted, thinking of how close she had come to letting heartbreak define her future. When James betrayed me, I thought that was the end of love for me. I came here seeking safety, not happiness. And now? Isaac asked, his hands cradling her face. Gabriella smiled, feeling the last fragments of her once broken heart fuse together, stronger at the mended places than they had ever been before. Now I know that sometimes the end is just the beginning of something better, she said, leaning forward to kiss her husband as the last rays of the setting sun bathed them in golden light. And that some hearts don't need fixing so much as they need the right person to love them exactly as they are. In the vast landscape of the Arizona territory, with dangers and hardships alongside beauty and opportunity, Gabriella had found not just a home but a love that had healed wounds she thought would never mend. What had begun as an arrangement of convenience had blossomed into something rare and precious, a partnership built on respect, grown through adversity, and transformed by love into the greatest adventure of her life. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Gabriella rested her head on Isaac's shoulder, utterly content. The broken-hearted girl who had stepped off the stagecoach a year ago was gone, replaced by a woman who had discovered that sometimes the most remarkable journeys begin with a single step toward the unknown, and the most enduring love stories start with the simple words, "Then let me be the man who fixes it."